Call to order the RTC meeting for January 20th with a roll call.
Darren Tedford,
Here.
Naomi Dorr,
Here.
Ed Lawson,
Here.
Bill Thomas,
Here.
Mary Luz Garcia,
Here.
Devin Reese,
Here.
Adam Spear.
Here.
Thank you. We have a quorum.
Thank you. Pledge of Allegiance. Naomi, will you lead us?
Sure. It's my honor to lead us in the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. Are you going to do these? So we have our special recognitions on 1.3.1. Congratulations to Keolis Driver of the Month, Mr. Malik Medov.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. My name is Karen Pinkerton. I am the Customer Experience Manager for Keolis. I am excited to introduce to you Malik Medov, who unfortunately cannot be here though. He is currently on vacation in France. Malik is our Employee of the Month. A little bit about his background, he was actually born in Nice, France. Again, likely why he's back home. And he moved to Nevada in 1998, residing in Reno. He was an electric engineer. That's what he went to college for, and he currently speaks 7 different languages. Malik accepted a position of a bus operator for Keolis and RTC September of 2021. What I want to talk about with Malik is we often get compliments of great drivers, safe drivers, things that are very recognizable and appreciated by the public. But with Malik, he's done a couple things that have gone above and beyond. And just between November 22nd and December 23rd, he received 4 different compliments, but I'd like to share 2 specifically with you. One of which was a Thanksgiving rescue. He had recognized a woman down over at 4th Street Station that was in distress. She looked very worried and concerned, and he approached her. She didn't speak English, she didn't have a cell phone, and she had just taken a bus from Mexico, I believe, all the way to Reno to be with her family for Thanksgiving, but she was lost. She didn't know what to do or where to go. He spoke to her in Spanish and was able to get her to the place, the bus and the bus route that she needs to take to find her family. He said, "Here's my name, here's my phone number, and if you run into any problems, I'll be happy to guide anybody to get you to where you need to go, and you're gonna be with your family soon." And so his father sent a message to us and said, "Thanksgiving rescue, we really appreciate it." So I love that story, I thought it was great. In addition to that, there was also a father who sent a message over to us. He had his 12-year-old daughter riding a bus home. It was a late winter night, cold, snow on the ground, and probably 7 or 8 in the evening. And she was a 12-year-old child, basically, and he let her off the bus, and then he kind of looked at her. She was just standing there. So he opened the doors back up and said, "Are you waiting for somebody?" She said, "No, yes, I'm sorry. I'm waiting for my dad. He'll be here shortly." And he said, "Come back on the bus where it's warm. We'll wait together." And he had casual conversation with her until her dad came up, and then he wished them both a Merry Christmas, and he was off. So those are just great stories where he really went above and beyond to take care of our customers out there on the streets. So that's something that I really appreciate about Malik. He's got this very contagious, friendly, helpful personality. He loves helping others. By trade, it's just something natural that comes to him. He's the epitome of contagious kindness, and everybody talks about him kindly in the office, out on the streets. We just really love that he's a part of our company, and we love his welcoming smile and appreciate him with us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. 1.3.2 is congratulations to the MTM Employee of the Month, Mr. Wayne Ming.
Good
Good morning, I'm Jessica Rutherford, the Operations Manager for MTM Transit. Wayne had actually fallen ill yesterday, so he is not with us today. Wayne is our Employee of the Month for December 2022. Wayne brings 20 years in he will hit 20 years this April working with RTC Access. And previously, before that, Wayne served his entire career in the military. Wayne's most notable achievements in his safe riding record of the past 5 years with MTM Transit, he actually helped save somebody's life on transporting one of the passengers. His quick response is why this gentleman thanks us for him still being able to travel with us. He has never received a client complaint. Wayne is a joy to be around with a big smile, a kind word for everybody, and offers assistance when needed. Wayne has had no complaints, negative iDrive events, or incidents during the month of December. Wayne is an asset to MTM Transit and embodies our mission of every trip is important. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
All right. Let's move on to item 2, public comment. Mr. Ryan Kinney, followed by Ross Kinson.
Good morning. Just a couple of things. One, been noticing around Main 4th Street Transit Center and some of the, probably most of the bus stops, that there it's not really readable or legible braille / large print for the bus stops. And the bus stops, when you see wait at the bus stop, for example, I'll give you one example. One on Washington and 5th. That's a good example of not having a good readable braille or large print for a person to read if you're wanting to call in for the next bus. And also at the 4th Street station, there's not an up-to-date locating of braille or large print of where the buses are at. And one other thing is, I was wondering, are you guys going to start talking about the future of FlexRide? Because right now you have 4 areas of FlexRide. Is that something that's probably talking about the retreat, or what's the idea or the plan for FlexRide is? Is it just going to be staying at 4 areas or expanded, or what? Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Kinson?
Morning, my name is Ross Kinson, and I am a business agent at Teamsters Local 533. I will also, as of next month, be taking over Mike Pilcher's role as the president of the Northern Nevada Central Labor Council. So I will be working with all of you probably on a regular basis. So I hope to get to know each and every one of you very well. I'm here today to pose the question to you as to our policy changes that we've recently put forth to NRS 277 and other policy changes to make transit better in Northern Nevada. Basically, what I'd like to pose to you today is, what is it that you guys are looking to do on changing the policy? What are you doing on your end? What are you basically moving your staff to do as far as making policy changes to make transit better in Northern Nevada? We've had a litany of issues, right? You guys all know what they are, whether it's the issues that we've had dealing with lockouts of pumping rooms for lactating mothers, whether it's the 3 strikes that we had, whether it's the continued board charges against Keolis and the continued arbitrations that we're having to go to, right? There are serious issues that we continue to speak to and put forth to this body that I feel just aren't being addressed wholly and completely. And so we've put together requests for changes to NRS 277, and I'm here today to ask you guys to get behind the changes that we've put together and to move your staff in a direction that will actually make some positive changes for transit moving into the future, right? The changes we put forth, we believe, are common sense, right? There's nothing there that doesn't, in my mind, work for both sides, right? It's been a Herculean effort on our part to get these changes through, and so again, as we sit down and we have further conversations. What I'm asking from this body is to look at the changes seriously and to move your staff to help push those changes through, right? Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, this is public comment. Anyone else in the public wishing to speak at this time? See none, we'll bring it back to the dais, and I'm looking for an approval of the agenda.
Mr. Chair, I would make a motion to approve the agenda.
Okay, got a motion
Second.
and a second. Any further discussion? In Sparks, I say vote, because we got it electronic. But all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. All right, let's move on to consent items. Anyone wishing to pull a consent item? If not, I'm looking for a motion.
I have one item, Mr. Chair, item 4.4.4.
Okay.
And I think I may have a, which one? 4.4?
4-4.
Hold on just one sec. I think, that was one I was going to pull, and let me just see here. I think I was going to pull 4.4.3. And let me just see, one more second. I think that's it.
So 4-4-3 and 4-4-4?
Right.
Okay, I'm looking for a motion.
Move to approve the remaining items.
Got a motion, looking for a second.
Second?
Got a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Let's move on to 4.4.3.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, do you want me to, or do you want to give a presentation? I just wanted to ask a couple questions. I know this item, is very welcome. One of the questions that we just had was, will the RTC coordinate the Washoe County safe routes to schools and city staff? I want to make sure. To evaluate if pedestrian safety items such as the striping changes, the pedestrian flashers and the sidewalks would be included in the project. Could you just address that?
Good morning, Chair, members of the board, Dale Keller, Director of Engineering. For the record, for this project alone, and maybe take a step back this is part of our payment preservation program.
Right.
And the projects that we're looking to implement in 2023 construction year. Part of that process as we go through, we work closely with all the city staffs, either Reno, Sparks, or the county, to make sure we're implementing the correct lane striping, including pedestrian safety as we go through this axis. One thing included in this Las Parisas, Los Altos project is making sure we're looking at pedestrian ramps and making sure we're accommodating our ADA requirements.
Right. So the reason I'm asking was it seemed that the staff report only included replacing pavement and the pedestrian ramps, but I guess our question was about regional roads and safety changes that should be included. And the city, just bottom line, has no funding for these type of capital, and so we were hoping that those could be incorporated. Is that?
So, Councilwoman, as we look through the projects and we finalize that design, we'll work closely with city staff and Public Works Department, making sure that we do have that finished product. Now, if there's things that are in addition that are outside, we'll continue to coordinate and communicate and identify different funding sources if that's the.
Okay. Well, anyway, just restating our commitment to pedestrian safety and the other safety improvements. And you are the agency, RTC is the place where those can happen and where you have a sufficient budget, I guess, to address it. And we just wanted to get that on the record and want to work with you on those improvements. So thank you. And with Mr. Chair, I would make a motion unless there's any other questions.
Any other questions? No? Okay, let's make a motion.
Okay, well, I would move to approve item 4.4.3.
A second.
Got a motion and a second. Any further discussion? See none. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. 4.4.4, Mr. Reese.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My question on this one is really twofold. Number one, very comprehensive and complete material in the staff report. So thank you for that. I think the work that you all are doing to keep us informed about the changes in the nature of this particular item is important. And the reason why I pull it is twofold. Number one is it is important, I think, to communicate with the public about the improvements that are being made here. And as I understand it, although there's an increase in the total overall project goal total, it really represents an increase of $5 million on a larger $12.5 million commitment, which ultimately results in something near $10 million in improvements. And because we've just had a series of storms that have gripped the region recently, and now we're dealing with potholes, I think it is important to sort of just highlight for the public what this particular agenda item is. And so what I'm hoping you might do is just lay out for us what I think is an excellent agenda item, and certainly I'm going to be supportive, but I think it's important to call it out to the community.
Commissioner Reese, thank you for this opportunity. Once again, Dale Keller, Director of Engineering. We are in our 2023 program as we start moving forward construction-wise. We are looking to increase our deferred maintenance of our roads. And part of that is what you're pointing out in this agenda item is the additional resources to do that and implement that. The timing is really good, and this is a foresight to Agenda 6.1. We discussed the overall 2024 street and highway projects. I'm going to talk about briefly what we're looking to do in 2023 to help accelerate and attack that deferred maintenance. And the timing is right, what we're seeing from this winter and the deterioration of our roadways. So this is a great timing to put more resources to keeping good roads good.
I think my follow-up question is really how do we prioritize the various roads? Right? I want to make certain that our communities that have we'll call it the worst roads, are the ones that are prioritized, and that we have some internal policies of how we choose, in this case, which roads we're slurrying, right? I want to make sure that they're not all concentrated in one particular area or in one socioeconomic group, but yet that we have a routine policy that sort of removes the politicization of those things from it. And I take it that that is what this item speaks to.
Yes, sir. And we have a payment preservation group which incorporates all of our city staff, public works staff, as county staff to talk about what performance measures are we trying to reach. So we blindly look at our roadway network, our regional road network, and making sure we're addressing the top priorities that we need first. And then we have collective input from each of the local agencies to making sure that we're hitting what is needed from local perspective, then regionally how this all fits together.
Okay, thank you with that in mind. Unless there's other comments, I'll
Mr.
be
Chair, I
prepared to
do
move.
have a comment
go
or
ahead.
question. And thank you for pulling this item, Mr. Reese. Just as a follow-up, I know in addition to the potholes, we've been experiencing delamination, right? And so you have that opportunity to not just do the overlay, but maybe to grind and to do an overlay rather than more of a patch. And I guess I just wondered, is that an opportunity? And I'll be a little selfish here. So I have Ward 2. Ward 2 is south of Moana, essentially, and so it includes places like Virginia Street, Veterans Parkway, Steamboat south to, Veterans specifically from Steamboat all the way down to Geiger Grade. That section seems to be in need of, it's a very heavily traveled road. And I just wondered I know that we help provide and prioritize the list, but I wondered, is that in your mind on the list, and what's your expectation there?
Good questions, and there's a lot to digest out of that. So first of all, when we talk about routine maintenance, and that falls with the local jurisdiction. So
Sure.
maintain potholes, and there's a great system in place where we can help address it. I know your public works staff has been inundated with phone calls.
They have.
and so have we, right? So
Yeah.
what we're looking to continue to work with staff and seeing from their maintenance teams, if there's a road that now, hey, RTC, can you look at this and reevaluate that? We're creating that list and that log, understanding what is most important, and hey, we are seeing more deterioration because of this winter, the storms that have come through. So that was part of that process when we reevaluate that together as a group. And each month we meet as that pavement preservation group to make sure we can adjust as needed.
Okay. Well, I guess the issue when you do meet with the group, if you could talk about taking it to the next level where you would actually do a grind and an overlay versus a seal, that would be very appreciated, because some of the roads, I guess, there's so much traffic down there in South Reno, so much heavy use that it's probably kind of accelerating past your typical useful life for the interim repair. And so I'd just love it if you could explore that with our staff. That would be awesome. Okay, thank you.
If I can, Mr. Chairman, just to add a little bit on, particularly for the public to understand how this works. And we work very closely with the three staffs. Our system is designed, we think, to be prudent and wise on how we spend the money, because like everything you all touch, there's not enough to do everything. So we really focus collectively on what's the best for the network in terms of investment. So we don't pick roads necessarily just to do a physical improvement. We look and say, is the money better spent perhaps preventing a bunch of roads that would accelerate the potholes by maybe doing a seal or something like that. So we optimize every one of the roads to get the most for the community to make sure the road's in its best system. So the reason I bring it up is because that's the counterbalance to the crisis mode that we find ourselves in right now, where everybody needs a fix. And we unfortunately can't hit everything. So there's a real structured, formalized way we work with your staffs to pick these roads based long-term on the best bang for the buck for the community.
Mr. Chair, I suppose that then, Mr. Thomas, begs the question of what is the backlog that you all see regionally? Meaning, I can tell you that Reno has a backlog that's probably in the hundreds of millions. I don't know if that's accurate. I wouldn't want to misstate it, but what is the backlog for RTC? And ultimately, of course, that backlog then informs us. If you're just saying there's deferred maintenance of $700 million, whatever the number is, and each year we contribute $12.5 million to it, you can see we'll never reach the delta between those two things. So what is the backlog?
Commissioner Reese, if this is a great agenda topic, if the board pleases, for our retreat in February, March now, we can get into those details and talk about how we develop our performance measures and what we call our payment condition index of an 80, and how do we hit that goal. We just created a fresh round of data for the 3 year, for the whole region. And so we're happy to walk through that and talk through what is our needs and now and then also in the future.
Fantastic. Thanks for that. With that in mind, Mr. Chair, I'm prepared to move to approve this agenda item.
Okay, we got a motion. Looking for a second?
Second.
Got a motion and a second. Any further discussion? One quick thing, you did say the right words, pavement condition index. We use that in Sparks. And there is a point where it's better to slurry seal and then wait to the degradation to completely replace. So it works for us, and I'm glad to see that we're talking the same language. So with that, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you. All right, 5.1, public hearing. We're going to conduct a public hearing for the approval of Amendment Number 1 to the 2050 Regional Transportation Plan. Adopt a resolution approving Amendment 1 for the RTP.
Good morning, Chair and the board members. My name is Xuan Wang, Senior Technical Planner with RTC. Today, I'm going to present Amendment Number 1 to the 2050 Regional Transportation Plan. The amendment is to reflect a schedule change to the NDOT project to add an auxiliary lane on eastbound I-80 from McCarran Boulevard to Keystone Avenue. This project was originally scheduled for 2040 in RTP. Due to funding availability, it was moved forward for construction in 2023. Since it's a capacity project, according to federal regulations, any changes in capacity projects in the RTP require a formal RTP amendment process and an air quality transportation conformity analysis is needed. The project change was modeled in the regional travel demand model, and an air quality analysis was conducted using EPA's MOVES model. The results demonstrated that all criteria pollutants are within the motor vehicles emissions budget, and the transportation conformity determination can be made. The Interagency Air Quality Consultation Group met on December the 20th, reviewed the analysis, and recommended approval. Following RTC's public participation plan, a 21-day public comment period started on December the 30th and ended yesterday on the 19th. So draft amended RTP was posted on the RTC website, and a public notice was published on local newspapers. So far, no public comments were received regarding this item. The Technical Advisory Committee met on January the 5th, received a presentation and recommended approval of the amendment. Typically, we also bring this to the Citizens Advisory Committee, but the January meeting was canceled due to a lack of quorum. So we plan to bring this back in February as an information item. With that, I'm happy to answer any questions regarding the amendment process. And we also have NDOT project manager Aaron Lobato here for any potential specific project-specific questions. Thank you.
Questions from the commission? No?
Just glad to see it. It's awesome.
Good. All right, this is a public hearing. Anyone in the public wishing to speak at this time? Seeing none, I'll bring it back to the dais, and we're looking for a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve.
Got a motion?
Second.
And a second by Mr. Reese. Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. All right, public hearing regarding approval of Amendment 5 to the FFY 21-25 Regional Transportation Improvement Program, and adopt a resolution approving Amendment Number 5 to the RTIP.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning, members of the board. Graham Dollarhide, Senior Technical Planner with RTC. This is Amendment Number 5 to the Federal Fiscal Year 2021 to 2025 Regional Transportation Improvement Program. This is being conducted in conjunction with the RTP amendment item that you just heard. This RTIP was originally adopted in March of 2021. Again, this represents the 5th amendment to that document. This particular amendment adds new projects, consolidates 2 projects into one, and updates funding, project funding schedule and scope for various other projects. One project, as explained during the RTP amendment item, required transportation conformity analysis. That project was found to be in conformity with federal air quality regulations. Public comment was, a notice for the public comment period was opened in December 30th of 2022, closed yesterday, January 19th, 2023. This 21-day public comment period is longer than what we've experienced with the last few amendments to this document, which were all 7-day periods, and that is on account of the requirement for the transportation conformity analysis consistent with the public participation plan. We did receive one comment during the comment period. It was in regards to a project on Center Street and as to why it was not being included in the amendment. The project is currently in both the RTP and RTIP, but no new information or changes are available at this time, which is why it's not being included in the current amendment. We did receive recommendation for approval by the TAC. Unfortunately, the CMAQ meeting was canceled on account of a lack of quorum. We will be taking it back to them as informational during next month's meeting. So details of the projects included within this amendment. The I-80 Keystone Package 2 Phase 2B project is a new project. This is the one that required the air quality analysis due to the addition of an auxiliary lane, which in this case represented a capacity increase. It doesn't always, auxiliary lanes don't always result in a capacity increase, but under the federal regulations, technically it did in this case. And this auxiliary lane will be to eastbound I-80 between West McCarran and Keystone. The West 4th Street Improvements, West McCarran to Vine project is another new project that is closely associated with an existing project in the RTIP. Also for West 4th Street, that was originally, the project limits to that were originally Stoker to Evans. That project will be administratively modified to change the limits from Vine to Evans to eliminate the overlap. And the reason for this new project is that additional federal funding became available that allowed us to extend the limits. The Sierra Street Bridge Replacement Project was 2 projects within the RTIP. It is being consolidated into one project. It essentially combines the design and construction phases and adds funding for the right-of-way phase as well. We also updated the federal and local funding sources. As for changes to existing projects, there were a few with increases to construction funding. One of those being the Sparks Boulevard Corridor Phase 2 project. Additionally, the US 395 North Valley's Phase 1B project. This is the one that was pulled from the last agenda, the December meeting, and thus excluded from Amendment 4 due to ongoing updates in project costs and funding sources. Those have now been corrected and updated and are therefore being included in this Amendment 5. Additionally, the US 395 North Valley's Phase 2 project is updated to include a federal discretionary grant that was recently awarded. It is the infra grant that RTC worked jointly on with NDOT. Sorry. Additionally, there were a couple of projects that added a construction phase. The Pembroke Drive Capacity and Safety Project was originally just included funding for only design. We are now adding construction funding to that project, and the same is true for the South Virginia Street and I-580 Exit 29 Capacity and Safety Improvements Project. This is the South Virginia Street exit off of I-580 near In-N-Out. So this will add a northbound lane to South Virginia Street between the I-580 off-ramp and Longley Lane. As a reminder, the RTIP is a 5-year program of projects. It's a federally required document that is consistent with our long-range plan that you see there in the first bubble. It is required to be updated at least every 4 years. RTC typically does this every other year. We do foresee a full update to the RTIP upcoming here early in calendar year 2023. The programming piece, which you see there with the red square around it, is a necessary step in the project development process. It advances projects from the first 5 years of the long-range plan, and complete project details are typically not available until after, later in the process, when public comment activities and full design have been complete. So we are seeking approval of Amendment 5 to the RTIP, and with that, I will take any questions. Thank you.
Ms. Stewart?
Yeah. First of all, I'm extremely happy to be here at this particular meeting because these are amazing projects. And I wanted to particularly highlight the ones that you just spoke about in the North Valleys. Several years ago, the city of Reno really encouraged our regional, both RTC and ourselves, to work on this Virginia Street. This is 395 in the North Valleys from McCarran to Golden Valley. And then the phase 2, but this phase is 2023. That's amazing. I mean, that's next year, construction. That's what it says here. And I thought people should know that. I guess as a compliment, the project that we've really pushed is also Virginia Street itself, parallel to that section. Where does that fit in the planning?
That project, it may eventually be combined. Oh, next agenda item. All right. Well, we'll get more details on that to follow, I suppose.
Okay, so great. So they're so critical. I mean, it's very important, I think, to have Virginia Street in place. you know, to do construction on either one of these is obviously going to impede traffic while the construction's going on. And I think having an improved one and then the other, or the other and then the one, will really help our region drive, right? Transport, everything. And I know that in the North Valleys, they're experiencing tremendous challenges with traffic, whether it's at the exits, just the traffic jams at the high travel times, you know, morning and night commute, evening commutes. So I'm just extremely happy to see this. Also, the other project that kind of really stood out to me was the Sierra Street Bridge. That's been on a list for, I don't know, at least a decade. And I'm thrilled that it has made it this far and is on to be constructed in 2026. I think that's, you know, will really help too with our flooding. I know it was built high enough
We
to.
don't say the F word.
Oh, we don't? Okay, sorry. Well, it's an ancillary benefit of the transportation component, but it was built, I think, to pass a at least 50-year flood. Sorry, Mr. Chair. And I think that whatever is constructed will really help, you know, both travel and flooding, sorry. Now that I've been properly admonished. But anyway, just some few positive comments. I love what you're doing here. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Mr. Reese?
Mr. Chair, thank you for the opportunity. First of all, these are all exceptionally exciting projects because they tell you that A, the region's growing, and B, we've made some critical investments both from NDOT, from the federal government, and from RTC's perspective. I suppose I want to start, Mr. Dollarhide, by asking a question about the difference between these acronyms that we continue to talk about. It's easy for us as electeds, I think, to talk about them in a certain way. But because I'm new on the body, I'm trying to learn and be able to use the language that you and your staff use. So the first one that I understood what's being discussed here was the State Transportation Plan. So that is the STIP, and that's NDOT's long-range planning process, and what's the year that it looks at? Is that a 20-year look?
So this item here, the Regional Transportation Improvement Program, must be folded into NDOT's statewide Transportation Improvement Program. And so that is a short-term document, but they do have a long-range plan as well, similar to our Regional Transportation Plan, the RTP, the item that you just heard.
Okay, so we have the Regional Transportation Plan, the RTP, which is a 20-year look.
Correct.
We have the RTIP, which is the 5-year look.
Correct.
And then we have the STIP, which is the state's transportation plan. Is that correct?
Correct.
So my question really has to do with a number of the Boomtown, Garrison, the Lawton, Verdi area, and the McCarran interchange. So I understand that a number of bridge replacements are coming down, we'll call it the pike, for lack of a better analogy in transportation parlance. But my understanding is that a number of those bridges are now kind of on an accelerated path for replacement. And I want to make sure that because NDOT has now confirmed that, for example, the Boomtown Garrison Bridge replacement is in the NDOT STIP, that it also makes it, and funding to be obligated, I think, by June of 2024, which is very exciting for the folks who live in that area. But I want to make sure that this project is also in our 2021 through 2025 RTIP.
Yes, and I believe NDOT is planning to include that project into the RTIP in a future amendment, probably with our next update.
Okay, so it's kind of a cooperative process by which it is, I guess, the federal money has come in. We as a region have prioritized those bridges through your good work and help, and now it needs to make its way on the state side. Is that the correct way to see it?
Yes.
Okay. Well, again, my point is ultimately that, I love that you've confirmed for me something that I can now share with the community, which is that these processes ultimately begin to yield placement on a list. And those lists are instructive, although perhaps not the final thing. I suppose when we see them on a list, people imagine that it is an absolute certainty, and we all know that there are a few things in life that are certain. But at least your confirmation for me in this process helps me understand where the placement is, and it's also helpful to understand the interaction between the RTIP, the RTP, and the STP. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, I have one follow-up.
Go ahead.
Thank you. I too wanted to follow up on the Boomtown Garson overpass because for at least 5 years, we have talked endlessly about this bridge, which is just a 2-lane. It doesn't have pedestrian, little rim. There's no bicycle access. And yet there's a community here, which is going to be growing on the south side of I-80 tremendously. I mean, we've had projects after projects come into Reno, which all have growth on the south side, which will all need to access to the north side. And this has been like a pivot point conversation, this one bridge. How do we connect this community that is now will be split by I-80? So I'm so pleased too, as Mr. Reese mentioned, to actually get this on a plan and get it constructed potentially sooner rather than later, because all of our questions have been answered with it's on no plan. It has no plan for replacement. We're looking at 10 years at least, 15 maybe. And so to have it moved up on the schedule is incredibly important. And I think it really shows that you are hearing us, both of you from NDOT and RTC, where this fits. And so thank you. I want to send my thanks to, and I know the council member for that area too will be incredibly grateful for this. The second one, I want to just do a little shout out as Pembroke. Once you put in veterans, Southeast Connector, suddenly Pembroke became a pivotal road. And it's, a very small road. It's like a 2-lane, it winds. There's again, no pedestrian, no bike, no nothing. And yet I think probably the travel on that road's, doubled to tripled to quadrupled based on the new roads, Southeast Connector. So I'm glad to see that on the list too. I think that will really help that region be safer. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, anyone else? All right, this is a public hearing. We'll open it up to the public for comment now. Anyone in the public wishing to speak? Seeing none, I'll bring it back to the dais, and I'm looking for a motion.
Move to adopt.
Second.
Got a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Let's move on to item 6.1, a report regarding potential new fiscal year 2024 street and highway projects.
Good morning, Chair,
Dale,
board
how are
members.
you?
Dale Keller, Director of Engineering. We'll get the presentation pulled up. So this discussion item is presenting potential new fiscal year 2024 street and highway projects for your consideration and input. There is no approval action being sought today, so at a future RTC board meeting, staff will compile the final list of projects as well as the relative interlocal agreements for possible board action. So today is just receive this report, and we're looking for your input and consideration. So jumping right into it, here's this nice flow chart again, which visualizes the transportation planning and implementation process. So we are here in this orange step, which is the street and highway interlocal cooperative agreement. This is where we authorize projects for the region, and this is where we're looking to identify and prioritize funding, including fuel tax revenue for street and highway projects. So this program has been developed in accordance to that regional transportation plan, that in green, which is that 20-year minimum outlook. Then that gets derived to what we just was talking with Graham on that 5-year regional transportation improvement program. So now here with the street and highway ICAs, this is where we are doing a project authorization, and then staff, if approved, can include this funding in our annual capital and operating budget for implementation. So this project authorization staff is governed by NRS 373, where this board evaluates and approves projects based on their criteria that's outlined per the statute. Next, the Washoe County Board of County Commissioners then authorizes a project to help spend fuel tax. And then the county and the governing bodies of Reno and Sparks, as appropriate, authorize the RTC to act and perform these projects on their behalf through these ICAs. In your agenda packet, there are 2 exhibits depicting the new potential projects for fiscal year 2024 for Reno and for Sparks, and I'll highlight each project as well as talk about our annual work programs. As Commissioner Reese brought up previously today was our payment preservation and reconstruction program. We work closely with our agency partners to implement these regional-wide improvements. At the top, we look at, for that payment preservation and reconstruction, we're looking to keep regional roads in good shape. Roughly, we spend about $22.5 million on our annual budget. to achieve our performance measures. We talked about that PCI of keeping it at 80. And these specific projects are selected by that group of public works professionals from each of the cities as well as the county. The other annual work program is the Traffic Operations and Intelligent Transportation Systems, or ITS program. The RTC roughly allocates about $10 million to address traffic hotspots, including intersection operations and safety projects. The specific projects are identified by the region's traffic engineers that collectively call the Traffic Operation Management, or TOMS group, who help select those type of projects. All right, so moving on projects. The first project I'd like to highlight is the Truckee Meadows Safe Street and Roads for All, or SS4A project. This project applies systematic safety improvements to our regional road network based on the updated Vision Zero Truckee Meadows Action Plan. That's a mouthful. There are 11 roadways that are identified, as shown below, that were selected based on known traffic or safety issues, as well as locations in relation to high-density underserved areas or areas where there are a disproportionate number of vulnerable users, such as school zones, medical facilities, transit routes. The RTC is seeking federal funds through an SS4A grant in the amount of about $50 million. The award of this grant is anticipated to be announced at the end of the month, so there's more to come on this item. Next, the RTC is looking to improve our Virginia Line bus rapid transit line with the additional northbound transit-only lane, and that's from, as well as ADA improvements, and that's from Peckham Lane all the way up to Gentry Way. And this fiscal year, we'll be looking to start design. For projects in the North Valleys, we continue to invest much-needed infrastructure improvements with 3 projects, the first one being the Military Road Capacity Project, starting with preliminary design. Also, there's Buck Drive circulation, moving forward with final design. And lastly, the North Valleys North Virginia Street Capacity Project, and moving forward with a preliminary design. Over in Spanish Springs, the RTC recommends starting design for additional safety and operation improvements on Pyramid Highway by adding a southbound lane between Egyptian and Integrity. Now, focusing back inside the McCarran Loop itself, the RTC is, with our partners at NDOT, is finalizing the McCarran Loop study. The next steps is to deliver some of these near-term recommendations that are going to come out of that study. There are 2 locations that rose to the top, the first one being from Plum Lane to South Virginia Street, and the other one at El Rancho Drive to Rock Boulevard. Because McCarran Boulevard is an NDOT-owned facility, RTC is looking to coordinate with NDOT on the delivery and funding of these projects. And the final 2 projects are located off of Mount Rose Highway. The Mount Rose Highway Corridor Study identified the need to improve safety and operations between Bordeaux Drive and Thomas Creek Drive, and we're looking to start design in 2024. And lastly is the Geiger Grade Realignment Project to improve traffic as well as multimodal improvements by constructing a new roadway that bisects the traffic congestion that we see at that Veterans Roundabout with a new road between Old US 395, which is Virginia Street, and Geiger Grade Toll Road there. So before I conclude my presentation, this presentation really admits the current projects that the RTC is working on. Right now, our team, about 8 project managers, are delivering in over 65 active projects, and they start from anywhere from the design, construction, to closeout process. And to quickly highlight some of the team's successes back in 2022, the first one being the completion of that Mill Street Complete Street, Lemon Drive Segment 1 in the North Valleys, as well as that Sparks Boulevard Phase 1. The Pavement Preservation Group, also we talked about this moving forward. We repaved 60 regional roads, about 10 million square feet of roadways, keeping good roadways good. And as we talked about our 2023 program, we're looking to increase that program to decrease and attack that maintenance backlog. Thank you for your attention, and I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Questions from the commission?
Mr. Chair.
Ms. Stewart.
So I hope you'll indulge me. I do have a few questions on some of these projects. And first of all, let me just say, I'm extremely happy to see these projects. I know, having worked in my capacity for 8 years, I'm extremely familiar with almost every one of these roads that you've proposed, and I think they all need to be addressed. So kudos to you and NDOT and our own communities for prioritizing these. I'm going to work from south to north, and just a quick few questions. So on the Geiger Grade realignment, so I have, again, Ward 2, which is Moana South. Geiger Grade, the roundabout down there, is in, I would call it desperate need of reconfiguration. I know that you've talked to City of Reno. We're looking at moving forward. We've talked to NDOT about implementing some things ourselves in the interim, some restriping, some signage and so on, because it's a very confusing place, to navigate. And additionally, we have horses coming right through the roundabout. And we're working desperately to get horses fenced out of all of our roads. And NDOT's been amazing in terms of looking at an overpass or underpass on Geiger grade for wildlife, horses and any kind of wildlife. So the sooner the better on that one. But I guess I just wanted to confirm on this realignment, does it include a reconfiguration or redo of the roundabout? Or what's the status there?
Commissioner Dare, the answer to your question is there's two separate projects. One of the active projects that we're currently working on is the roundabout modification. So that's coming out of that traffic operations group, that TOMS group. So we're looking to make some implementations, if not in 2023, in construction in 2024. While we have this long-term solution for the area to help relieve traffic and take all that traffic that's coming down Geiger and not having it go to that roundabout. So that's the long-term
So it's like a roundabout around the roundabout,
Correct.
I guess.
Yeah, it's going to
Okay.
bypass all that.
Bypass.
Traffic. Yep.
Okay.
So we'll bypass that traffic, we'll get it to the I-580, and that's the overall plan for that Geiger grade realignment.
Okay, great. The second one I wanted to ask you about is the Mount Rose Highway. So we had a great presentation from NDOT we had a public workshop about taking out the yellow flashing lights. I guess this is a statewide initiative. The belief is that the flashing lights are actually cause more of a unsafe condition, and removing them. And just so everyone knows, these flashing lights are about, hey, there's a stop ahead. You might be going really fast, but you're going to have to possibly slow down and stop here soon. I've heard anecdotally, and I just wanted to get your take on this, anecdotally that since the yellow light came out, there's been some accidents. And I don't know if you're aware of them or if our NDOT partners are aware of them, but it's been fairly criticized at my neighborhood advisory board, the removal of the lights. I didn't know if we're reconsidering or we're still moving forward on that path.
I can speak specifically to what we're looking to move forward on the Mount Rose study to help improve. The purpose of that project would be improve safety.
Right.
So as we continue to work with our partners at NDOT, what are those things that need to be implemented to help improve safety?
And this is safety that I'm talking about on Mount Rose.
Sure, and those are things that we have to consider during the final design, what makes sense contextually, both, and we'll work with NDOT staff as well as City of Reno staff, and I know this in Clark County, or in Washoe County as well, so collectively, what is the right solution for the area?
Okay, so I just wanted to let you know that there's been community concern about the removal of these warning lights. I know NDOT, who gave the presentation, I think it was, or maybe it was RTC staff, that were very passionate about removal of the lights, but I'm not sure in that particular location with the steep decline, the fast speeds, if that was the right answer. So I'd love to just see it while you're, I think they're not far from where you're doing this reconstruct. One more thing, I guess I don't want to take too much time, Mr. Chair, but I did want to ask probably two more questions. One is about the downtown Reno, where you're doing the Safe Streets and Roads for All. And a question from our staff and folks was, you mentioned Center Street, it didn't seem like we had enough north-south. I guess you showed two parts, but I guess the concern, just passing it on, something you'll talk about with our staff, was a continuous north-south pathway was brought up to me. So I didn't know if you had a thought about that or a comment.
We'll continue those conversations with city staff about north-south connection. Part of the good thing about the Straight Streets for All, we're looking at how does this look as the overall network for multimodal connections as well as pedestrian connections. So we need to look at the holistic approach, and downtown Reno is a good place to build off of.
Okay, cool. And then last one, I already started bringing it up before about the Virginia Street. A question I had was, I know, and I'm not as familiar with this section of road, but I know there's a portion of Virginia Street that goes to dirt, actually, or it's an unimproved road. Will that be improved as part of this, or is that external to this?
No, ma'am, that portion of Virginia Street, I don't even know if that's an old still NDOT facility, but that's way north.
More north than this.
Red Rock up to the next.
So this is just a reconstruct of this section of Virginia that's already paved and already operational. Is it to widen it, or?
Correct. The proposed scope of work on this area of Virginia Street would be widened from a 2-lane to 4-lane, making sure then we add the multimodal components to with that as well. With all the development distribution centers we see in the North Valleys, we're making sure the combination of big trucks and residential is
Right.
all being accounted
All
for.
mixed in. It's one of our challenges in North Valleys is a lot of residential, a lot of industrial, leading to, conflicts, as you say. Thank you, Mr. Chair, for the time.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think some of my questions may dovetail with my comments or comments given by my colleague, Ms. Dewar, and I think are excellent and informed about the way in which our citizens interact with us. And so, Mr. Keller, I have a couple of questions. One about North Valleys in general, right? This is an area where we have some significant planning needs, both on the City of Reno planning side, but also on the transportation infrastructure side. And I want to understand how the RTC intends to coordinate some kind of, I assume there's some comprehensive planning that goes into coordinating phases between NDOT projects and RTC projects. There's a lot going on in the North Valleys. And at some point in time, I think it behooves us to, of course, inform the public, whether that's through project maps and certain internet-based ways of sharing information. Some people don't use the internet, so I just want to make sure we're having some comprehensive planning thought to the North Valleys projects, because they're all very exciting and very needed, and I think in many ways long overdue. Some of that is largely our fault. What can you tell me about the North Valleys project specifically?
Commissioner Crease, great comments. And yes, you identify the challenges about so many different types of projects, public work projects that are happening all at once. We do have a, I'll call it somewhat centralized website, which is northvalleys.improvements.com. And we've been working closely with City of Reno staff, the county, as well as the school district to show all those projects on one map. I can help distribute that to this commission as well as to the board, but also that's the challenge is how do these all line up when we do talk with one another. For example, when the US 395 projects are happening, how does that work with our North of Virginia project? We're doing a great job coordinating with NDOT for Spanish Springs when we talk about Sparks Boulevard and Pyramid Highway. How do these all pieces fit together? So those are things that we have very close coordination with our colleagues with. Then also you identify the challenging, how do we get this information out there to show the good work that we're doing?
Well, I appreciate that. I think it also, not only these North Valleys projects, but of course the improvements that are intended to happen to the McCarran Boulevard projects. I think those are very exciting too. And I suppose ultimately I make an assumption that you're prioritizing. We currently have a McCarran study going on, right? It's about ready to close or it's nearly finished. And so I want to make sure that the local agencies, because we all share part of this, beautiful road, are, included in that planning process and that some prioritization is given to areas as you've identified them here. I think it's also important because not all stretches of this roadway will happen at any one given time, but you'll take them in project basis. And so I think this one is important and probably impacts us region-wide. All of us, the county, the city, and both cities. What can you say about this particular project, Mr. Keller?
Sure. This is once again is the NDOT facility. They're the ultimate owners and maintaining of the facility themselves, but they are very responsive to the needs of the locals and the needs of the RTC as well. So when we develop these projects, if RTC is leading the delivery of these projects, we ensure, for example, between Plum and Virginia Street, city staff is available, have input. We talk about the connections, and this study is really driven not only on traffic needs, but what other multimodal needs on there, making sure how this circulates together as the loop itself. So,
okay, and then my last question, Mr. Chair, and then I'll turn it over to anyone else on the body, relates to something that Councilmember Dewar or Commissioner Dewar mentioned about the north-south route identified in downtown Reno. So, of course, the city of Reno is out working with its own study. GAL is studying some placemaking issues. There have been a lot of conversations in the community by bicyclists and folks who are interested in that micromodal type of transportation. And at some point, when all these studies are done, and we in government tend to love studies, I'm hopeful that we are nearing a point at which we will have some decision made about a north-south route. And I'm not saying I have a preferred route or that my constituents are demanding a particular route, but there's certainly people who do have those particular ideas. And whether we use Center Street or Virginia or Sierra or Lake or some element of those, at some point in time, we've got to be done with all the studying and make a decision. When do you anticipate that will be?
I do not have a complete firm answer for you when I can pinpoint a date, say we will have an answer. We need to continue to work with City of Reno staff and make sure they're leading the effort, and this is the project they're seeing best for the city. And going back to the city council, understanding this is what they'd like to see for their region and for their city themselves. So we'll continue to work with staff, and we'll have Reno take a lead, and we'll be right there to help support them to understand what's best for the city of Reno. And
But with regard to the slide you showed about the Safe Streets for All, I mean, this is a key component about that decision, right? I mean, we've got to figure out how to move people, cars, and non-motorized vehicles, bikes, I suppose scooters, whatever mode of transportation is being used. We're coordinating that jointly, like we're working on those things, but you don't have any estimate of when you think a final decision will be arrived at? I mean, is it in this calendar year? Would you be so bold as to say it would be in this calendar year?
yes, sir, Commissioner Reese. I mean, there's ways that I think we're making strides to reach resolution conclusion. As we know, City of Reno is leading the Virginia Street placemaking study. My understanding of that should be wrapping up this springtime. We also worked with the University of Nevada, Reno to understand that micromode pilot study that went in and implemented. We're going to receive that data and that information here at the end of February, early March. So those two things, we also want to share what we learned. And for that micromode pilot study, those are a great way for us to determine the tools of these micromode infrastructures. Do they work? How do they work? Are they drawing more people? Are they utilizing them correctly? Are they safe? So that part of that's what we like to present not only to this board, but also to the public, say, here's the tools that are working for our region, and here's other ways we can implement on other projects like the Safe Street for All, and also north-south routes, and how do we build that overall connection of our micromobility as well as pedestrian connectivity.
Well, one of the things I want to do is also thank you and your staff for the way in which you have been able to work with our staff. I hear routinely that the meetings that you have are productive, that people are gracious and thoughtful in their performance of their respective duties. Obviously, when we come to this board, we're sitting as a regional body with each of us representing various entities on it. But I am constantly informed that there is excellent working relationships and the work is getting done. What I think is frustrating for the public is that government moves very slowly, and times painfully slow. And that is sometimes hard as an elected official because our constituents have a desire to know about their issue immediately. And it's hard to say, hey, we've got all these entities that have got to coordinate. Some people don't really understand the difference between the city, the county, the transportation body, the school district, and you are all playing in the same area. So again, I want to go back to what I said earlier, which is I thank you for the work that you're doing because it is important work, albeit slow.
Anyone else? Mr. Thomas?
Thank you, Chairman. Board members, just a couple brief comments. One of them is I know that Commissioner Hartung couldn't be here today. He was ill, and our system unfortunately didn't allow him to get in, some technical difficulties, but he's made it very clear to me in my conversations with him, and I wanted to put it on the record that he's very supportive of the Pyramid Highway operational improvement, which would extend the southbound lane between Egyptian Drive and Ingenuity. And then, since I've got the microphone, a couple things real quickly, getting back to Commissioner Reese's questions and comments. I guess the way I would explain it to the public, which ultimately all of you are the ones held accountable for the public's perception of what we do and don't do here, is but for these steps, these projects can happen. But between starting these processes and taking them as promises is always the challenge, because people often look and say, well, at some point you talked about this project, so I'm guaranteed I'm going to get it, and then this is what my expectations are. Well, as with all major capital projects, it's very hard to know at any point in time exactly what this thing is, and I think you would all want us, and so would the community, that we refine these and make sure the money is well spent, because we don't have unlimited resources. So I'm going to go out on a limb, and you can hold me accountable, and say that I believe from my conversation with the City of Reno that within the next quarter of this year, and I'll say next 3 to 4 months, that we'll have the answer you're looking for, which is what's going to happen not only north-south, but generally downtown. And to be honest, if we get this Safe Streets for All grant for $50 million, it's going to force the issue, Because when you get federal money, there's a timeline and there's a fuse on it. If you don't use it, you lose it. So that'll probably be the key pressure point of making something happen in downtown with, I know, an issue that people have been very concerned with. But I did want to reiterate, because it's a challenge for all of you and challenge for us, that the board promise is very hard to do when you're doing major capital items. We can only assure people that it's moving forward and it's moving to a point eventually to be in place. And so that's what I wanted to put on there. And then last thing is, particularly when we get to McCarran, we did a pretty exhaustive working with NDOT study of what the community thinks of McCarran Boulevard. And probably not surprising to any of us that drive it, this is like what I would call our freeway system too. In other words, the people perceive and use McCarran much differently from a local road. Yet we live in a world where the 3 local governments own the network. We are simply your agent to implement things that are better for the network. But particularly on McCarran, the view I would encourage the board and the community is that this is a true, if there's a regional road, this is a true regional road. What happens locally or in a given area does have impact on many more people. So it's that balance of a local desire in a particular area of McCarran Boulevard against what the purpose of that road is. So I just wanted to lay that out there, knowing that sometimes on these regional roads, everybody doesn't get everything they want because there's a greater good that we're trying to get to. So those are my comments. Thank you.
Okay, anyone else?
Just a question, follow-up for you, Bill, is, for example, this Geiger grade realignment. So it's out at 2026, and like you said, it's like a future promise. But if I was to prioritize these things down south, I would put it up above the Mount Rose improvements. And the reason is that is where all the growth in Reno has been focused until now we're switching to North Valleys. But for the last 2 decades, that's where the growth has been focused. Those people are log jammed. You know, they're going south because they don't want to go on Steamboat. And Steamboat, you know, and I'm going to ask you later because it's not on this agenda item, is going to be replaced or upgraded significantly starting soon. But that will actually create more log jams, right? So more people are going to come south. And I think the veterans areas, there's only really 2 ways out, right? You have to go on Steamboat or you have to go down to Veterans Roundabout. And so I would just like to see that kind of pushed up on the schedule if possible, because it's a planning document. So I'd love to plan to push it up because so many people are commuting and affected by that. Whereas I also personally have lived on the other side of Virginia in this county area, and there's a number of routes out. You know, there's a number of ways to get out. So these are just some thoughts, you know, just for your consideration as you finalize this plan.
Okay, anyone else? All right. Do we need a motion for this, or can we just accept the report? Okay, we need a motion to accept the report.
All right, so move to accept the report.
I got a motion. Second. And a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously. Okay, 7.1, Executive Director Report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So this, as always, is my favorite part of the day, which is I get to acknowledge the staff that are really the ones who implement the many good things that you've seen, for example, up to now in this meeting. We have been very fortunate, and I want to welcome our newest employee, Alex Cruz. Maybe Alex, if you can stand. Alex started in Public Transportation Department this week as an assistant transit planner. He comes to us at RTC from Carson City, where he served as their transit coordinator. So he's filling a very important role, but we happen to be quite lucky in the sense that Alex already has some skills and understanding of the world of transit, and we're going to take advantage of that by bringing him into our team, and we're looking very much excitedly towards Alex's integration into our team, and I'm sure the board will be seeing some benefits from his efforts and skills and knowledge in the near future. Construction of a new bus rapid transit station is set to begin Monday. The new station will be on South Virginia Street, across the street from the Pepper Mill. This bus stop is in the top 10 for passenger usage in our network. The upgrades will provide a comfortable, convenient way for passengers to use the RTC's Rapid Virginia Line transit service. We expect the project to be completed this summer. For those of you who've been by it, you probably will often see people standing in the dirt or near it because it's a very highly used facility that is not only undersized, but also the quality of the assets don't match up to it. So we're very excited about moving that project forward. The RTC is a sponsor of the Clean Energy and Transportation Conference. Registration is open for this event, which will be happening on February 2nd and 3rd at the Peppermill. Various panels will discuss things like electric vehicles, including buses, hydrogen fuel cell buses, battery technology, and alternate sources of revenue for infrastructure. Stakeholders from around the West and even some from Washington, D.C. will be here in town at the Peppermill. The event is just days before the start of the 82nd legislative session, and that will give Nevada lawmakers a chance to hear and be involved in some of the discussions about this important transportation issue. So I would encourage any of you who have the time and are available to do it to participate, and we can certainly help you in terms of coordinating any part of it or if the whole thing is of interest to you. As you know, January has brought one storm after another, and I want to thank our facilities maintenance team, which is made up of 4 people, for their efforts to clear snow from our parking lots to keep our properties safe. One of the questions we got during the storms was related to bus stops and snow. And as you can imagine, the primary purpose for moving snows on major corridors is to get the snow out of the way for the traffic that's moving through. So it did present some challenges at some of our bus stops in that the snow would often impede our ability to enter and load the buses. But the Keolis team, working with our FM maintenance team, strategically moved in and cleared out those stops, unfortunately one at a time, and allowed us to serve our customers better. So I want to thank our team as well as the Keolis team for their efforts in cleaning the snow. Lastly, I wanted to point out that this will be, fingers crossed, our last board meeting in these chambers. So unfortunately for county commissioners, they'll have to come over to RTC instead of using their nice warm parking place, but we'll do our best to make and comfort everybody. Our next meeting, which is set for February 24th, will be at our new boardroom, which is on the ground floor of the RTC administrative buildings located at 1105 Terminal Way. I'm very excited about opening this remodeled area. We had, like everything, some supply chain issues that impeded our ability to get it open when we originally planned. So a very exciting thing for us here at RTC. So I look forward to seeing you over there. And that concludes my comments.
Thank you. Anything on the federal report?
Mr. Chair, before we move on,
Yes,
I had 2 compliments and a question for Mr. Thomas.
go ahead.
First compliment, I actually heard from staff that, from the public, that your staff are out hand shoveling the bus stops up at Tahoe in particular and other places. But, this is above and beyond. We all know what a backbreaking work that is. Myself, my husband's laid up with he overdid it with the shoveling. I overdid it with the shoveling. All of us overdid it with the shoveling. Your staff were out shoveling for the public, not just using heavy equipment. So that was remarkable and noted. So I just wanted to let you know that. Number 2, the people in South Reno could not be more excited about this upcoming steamboat reconstruction project. And I just wondered if you could just tell us, I had heard it might be March. Of course, if we have the Winter Gedeon or whatever we're calling this to extend to April, I guess it might be April. But what are you thinking for start of that project? That is like the artery, so to speak, a pipeline in South Reno.
Good morning again, Chair, Commissioner Dorr. Dale Keller, Director of Engineering for the record. The Steamboat Parkway project and that widening at the intersection. We're looking to start construction later this summer. We are still working with NV Energy on some of the relocations to get the utilities out of the way first, and so we can get going with our project as well.
Okay, because originally it was last fall. Then we shifted, you said you wanted to get it constructed within one construction season, so you were going to start in March, but now it's not till end of summer?
Yes, ma'am, and we can provide you a more in-depth briefing and talk about where we are with our status and where we fall with the other utilities that need to get out of the way before we get going.
All right, well, everyone's very excited about this. Dreading it in some ways, right? But very excited about the ultimate completion of it and the ability to move it is like it's like having the clog in the artery, so to speak, down there. And then lastly, I know you all did an amazing job on the South Meadows or South Reno road study. And there were like, I want to say, maybe I'm wrong, but 65 projects were in there. 65. I mean, Steamboat Parkway is one of those. And you did a few others. I just wondered, what is the plan for, moving forward with that? Should I am happy to meet offline and separately, but I just wondered generally, are we still working on implementing that plan?
Short answer is yes, and Dale can certainly talk about the different pieces. What you point out is probably the biggest challenge. I said that earlier about the promises is all of these projects, there's multiple elements involved, and so people get frustrated because the right-of-way, for example, may take much longer than we thought, or a utility may not move fast enough. So we hear you, we understand it, both the elected officials as well as the community, and we're going to keep pushing. But
Okay.
Dale, I don't know if you can add anything specifically right now on the question about that study and what
We have a list. We have a
Yeah.
long list, as you mentioned, and
Yeah.
we keep checking those off. I'm happy to sit down with you. And your
Yeah, I'll
team to-
do an offline meeting, but I just wanted to, so many people, 70,000 some, 80,000 people live down there. Think of the 270 that live in Reno. They, whether it's a stoplight or an upgrade in traffic signaling or a turn lane, whatever it is, it's all about public safety at the end of the day. It's not even about moving faster. It's just about keeping people safe mostly. So I'm excited about, and just for those in the audience, I mean, this project was done 4 years ago, I'm going to say, back in 2018. So we're in 2023, and we've done a few of the projects, but we're excited to continue to move out with those. They don't rise to the level of this 19 million and, $40 million projects. They're more in the sub $1 million projects, but important nevertheless. So thank you.
Well, one last thing if I can, and Dale, maybe you can correct me, or fill in the blanks. I think we're opening a brand-new traffic signal either next week or the week after in that area of town.
Dale's getting his exercise.
He's getting his
Yes, I know. I'll just stay up here. Yes, we are. So very exciting news. We're going to be activating Signal on Wilbur May and
Oh.
South Meadows Parkway.
Fantastic.
Yep. And so we'll be doing a flip the switch event. So stay tuned, and we're looking forward to those who can participate.
Yeah, cool. Very neat.
I'm going to sit here.
Okay.
All right. On to Paul.
Good morning, Paul Nelson, Government Affairs Officer for RTC. As you know, a new Congress started just a few weeks ago, and part of the shakeup includes Congressman Mark Amodei. He's on the House Appropriations Committee, and as part of that, he'll be chairing the Legislative Branch Subcommittee. So it's kind of a wait and see, and we'll see if that move has any kind of effect on us here in Northern Nevada. The Appropriations Act also has some new rules as it pertains to the federal COVID money. State and local governments can use up to $10 million or 30% of that of their American Rescue Plan funding on road and bridge projects, or also to use for residents that have been affected by natural disasters. As you've probably heard, we're in the process of applying for the RAISE grant. We're putting in for $25 million for the Lemon Drive project. That's moving along pretty well. We've had a few meetings about it already, and the application is due February 28th. And we expect to learn if we'll receive an award for the Safe Streets and Roads for All grant later this month. You've heard about that a little bit already. We asked for $50 million for the collection of projects throughout Reno, Sparks, and Washoe County, where crash volumes are a little bit higher than they should be. So that's all I got on that. Thanks.
Thank you. Okay, let's move on down. 7.3 NDOT report.
Good morning. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a medium-length presentation to make this morning. First, I'd like to formally announce a transition in leadership at NDOT. After serving the state of Nevada for 4 years, Christina Swallow has moved on from NDOT. During her tenure, NDOT accomplished a number of things for the betterment of the citizens of Nevada, including updating our strategic highway safety plan to include equity and focus on speed, developing processes to prioritize critical safety improvements like wrong-way driver alert systems, and passing and climbing lanes, and also developing a process to help locals create their own local road safety plans. In terms of projects, NDOT approved more than 230 projects supporting 23,000 job years and cut the ribbon on critical infrastructure projects statewide. NDOT also brought back more than $280 million in federal grant funding. All of this was accomplished utilizing a goals-based, data-driven project prioritization process called the One Nevada Plan. Under Director Swallow's leadership, NDOT effectively responded to landslides, wildfires, record snowstorms, and the largest earthquake in the state in 60 years. Despite record vacancies, NDOT is without question a more data-driven and resilient organization due to her leadership, and the entire NDOT team wishes her the best on her next steps. Director Swallow also wanted to extend her thanks to this board and all the RTC Washoe staff for being supportive partners over the past years. As we say goodbye to Director Swallow, we're excited to welcome back a familiar face, Tracy Larkin Thomason. The appointment of NDOT's new director was approved unanimously by the Transportation Board of Directors on Monday, January 9th, and became effective this past Tuesday, January 17th. As many of you know, Tracy worked for NDOT for 34 years in planning, engineering, and other areas before spending 9 years as deputy director and retiring in 2021. Tracy brings extensive knowledge of NDOT's operation through administration, management, and technical roles throughout the department. She also brings a national perspective and has a deep understanding of the federal funding process, as well as proven leadership capability. For the past couple of years, Tracy's been working for the Intelligent Transportation Society of America, developing a national nonprofit organization program department and initiating and growing statewide smart and connected infrastructure applications. As the newly appointed NDOT director, we welcome Tracy home to Nevada, and we're excited she'll once again join the NDOT team. Next, our monthly update on traffic safety. In 2022, statewide, we saw an almost 1% drop in overall fatal crashes compared to calendar year 2021. Tragically, speeding and impairment remain the largest contributing factors increasing fatal crashes. Another preventable factor statewide is the number of unbuckled fatalities, which rose more than 5% between 2021 and 2022. Nationwide fatal crashes top contributing factors are the same as in Nevada. To save lives and reduce fatal crashes, NDOT and our partners statewide use the Strategic Highway Safety Plan. As many of us are familiar, the plan has established statewide goals and strategies with focus on elements of traffic safety, including engineering, education, enforcement, and emergency response. Recently finalized, the Speed Management Action Plan will also be implemented to develop further multidisciplinary strategies to manage speed on Nevada roadways. I also wanted to mention the Nevada Advisory Committee on Traffic Safety, which brings together NDOT representatives, the Department of Public Safety, Nevada DMV, together with state and local agencies to provide guidance, approval, and consensus on improving overall highway safety. All of these measures, coupled with local road safety plans, are initiatives that NDOT and our partners implement to reduce the total number of fatal crashes, as well as reinforce the importance of staying buckled up while in a vehicle, driving sober, and following speed limits on all roadways. With the Washoe County Traffic Safety Update, as of January 4th, 2022, it was reported that 43 lives have been lost in Washoe County crashes during 2022. That's up almost 5% from the previous year. One significant increase we have seen is in unrestrained or unbuckled motorists, up from 6 unbuckled deaths in 2021 to 8 in 2022. On the upside, in Washoe County, bicyclist fatalities are down significantly, pedestrian fatalities are down 10%, and motorcyclist fatalities are down 20%. These 3 reductions in fatalities are a positive trend, and we hope to keep that trend going. Next, I'd like to update everyone on the recent storm and inclement weather Nevada has been experiencing and what NDOT has done to keep our drivers safe. I'd first like to take a moment to thank our dedicated highway maintenance staff for their work during the recent winter storms in our region. The New Year's weekend storm brought heavy snow, localized flooding, and road closures. nearly 40 inches of snow fell near Mount Rose Highway, while Reno saw up to a foot of snow just over the weekend. Throughout the storms like this, our hardworking NDOT maintenance crews worked in staggered 12-hour shifts for 24-hour snow removal to help keep clear highways and keep Nevadans mobile. They battled the walls of snow and localized flooding to make highway travel safe for the public. During the first 2 weeks of this month, our highway crews dedicated over 15,000 hours to remove snow and clear highways across northwestern Nevada. One example of their work shown on the left is a section of 395 near the California border in Douglas County, which was temporarily closed as the heavy rains crossed mud and rocks onto 395. Our crews were able to divert the water and quickly and safely reopen the highway. Closer to the Truckee Meadows, our crews also utilize a controlled avalanche detonation system near the Mount Rose summit to loosen snow on the roadside slope. NDOT plow operators are then ready and positioned to remove that snow. Controlled releases like these help prevent unpredictable and potentially dangerous snow slides and avalanches that could bury vehicles and motorists on the highway. As many northern Nevadans did, crews also battled local power outages at highway maintenance facilities, but they worked through it all to ensure our vital highway maintenance equipment remained fueled and working the highways even if power wasn't available at their maintenance station. We all know the most recent major storm struck our region over the Martin Luther King holiday weekend. Our northwestern Nevada highway crews dedicated 1,500 more work hours to clearing snow and spreading more than 2,000 yards of salt and sand for better traction on the highways. This is particularly amazing regarding the high vacancy rates we have for maintenance positions. Throughout northwestern Nevada, our overall staff vacancy is approximately 45%. Our vacancy rate for highway maintenance workers is even higher. In this area where our workers are removing snow, some of our crews have up to a 75% vacancy rate. Still, we'd like to thank everyone who is on our team and dedicated to keeping our highway open and safe for all of our drivers. As we mentioned last month, NDOT held a snowplow naming contest for the public to engage in and be aware of our snow removal operations. The public was invited to submit creative and unique names for 3 snowplows, one in each region. We received more than 900 entries, indicating Nevadans were pretty enthusiastic about participating. We know that these snowplows help keep our roads safe and clear, especially during the last few weeks. This contest was a fun way to show the public's appreciation for our snowplow operators. So as a result of that contest, we have names for our 3 winning snowplows. So in the south, which is our District 1, up on Mount Charleston, we frequently have snow removal operations during the winter. And so the snowplow winning name for that area was Cirque du Snowlay. I'm gonna change out of order. So District 3 is northeastern Nevada. The winning name for our snow removal equipment out there was Nevada Thaw Enforcement. And then the northwestern Nevada one, you might see this vehicle driving around somewhere. Hopefully you're not trying to pass it while it's performing its operations, but you might see it parked. And the name on the badge next to the emblem on the hood of this truck is the Sierra Scoop. So we've placed the decals on our snowplows. We're excited to have the public be a part and be aware of our operations. And we are also going to send out certificates to the winning name proposers. So we'd like to thank every one of the 900 people who participated and submitted a vote. So before I finish, I wrote some notes as we were discussing, as things were being discussed earlier. I'd just like to mention a couple of things. It was mentioned already, but we do a lot of planning and we do a lot of studies. What we are doing when we do that is systematic evaluation of the needs of any particular corridor. The one that is, we discussed McCarran, also Mount Rose, and RTC's plans to do work on Mount Rose. You'll see an NDOT contract on Mount Rose this summer to do some improvements at Thomas Creek and at Edmonton. and actually at Callahan also. When we did the Mount Rose Corridor study, it resulted in 29 different recommendations for improvements along the corridor, and that was from the tree line to veterans.
Right.
And what we do when that study's completed is then, as Mr. Keller referred to, we have to take those recommendations and package them into projects. Obviously, there's funding that comes along with that. We use our own prioritization process that I mentioned before, and then coordinate with the local agencies and the RTCs to prioritize those projects, take reasonable sized chunks of what we can accomplish, and put those projects out. So we do the studies to make sure we cover all the bases, and then take bite-sized pieces of those, whether large or small bites, and start addressing the needs. And our One Nevada prioritization process covers statewide our needs. We attempt to cover our needs statewide, and so the challenges north, south, or east, if you will, are numerous. I wanted to mention that the yellow flashing lights, the advanced signal warning system, what you said, Commissioner, was accurate. We did a study based on updated guidance that came from nationally. We did a local study to take that national information and make sure it was pertinent to our local area. And we went across the north and across the south and updated our warning systems. And so the intent was to make it as safe as possible for those conditions. The best example was actually in Commissioner Hartung's area, where as we had increased the number of signals up Pyramid Highway, there were, call them legacy or remnant advanced signal warning systems. The most frequent use of those is when you come from an area, say a rural area, into an urban, and you're not, as a driver, you're not aware that there's going to be a signal. But the other requirements are when it's difficult to see the signal, geometry, traffic, whatever the case might be. And so we did go through and look at all of our systems that we had statewide, make recommendations to update them, and that's the result of the contracts and some of the removals, some of the modifications, some of the updates. And that's an ongoing process. It's not, we did it and we're not going to look back. We're going to continue to monitor. As you suggested, there have been some crashes. Whether it's NHP or local law enforcement, any crashes that are documented on our system, we track and we look at, as best we can, the circumstances and determine if there's something that's an engineering fix or even an education fix that we can implement for anywhere on our system. And so that is an ongoing process. It's not something that we've implemented. Correct. It's an ongoing process. Okay. The third thing, there's one more after this, but the third thing, we mentioned the Garson Road structures. In the recent legislation, the bipartisan infrastructure law, there was funding designated specifically for bridge repair. When we hear it, it'll be in our report. It's rather frequent that NDOT has some of the best bridges in the nation. Some of that is related to our climate, not this climate that we're experiencing this month, but our typically dry and arid climate makes bridges last longer and remain in better condition. Also, a lot of the bridges we have are younger. Typically, they're designed for between 50 and 100 years of service. Used to be 50, it's more like 75 now, and we get good performance out of our bridges. That helps to increase our ranking. But the age, they're not very old relatively, and so they will be. And so what we're doing with the money that was designated by the bipartisan infrastructure law is focusing on the oldest bridges that we have, knowing that they'll be the next to need to be replaced. Getting a head start, that money is approximately $45 million a year. And we can, some of that goes to local agencies, 15%. We've worked with the RTC to designate that money, some of that money for what I would call off-system bridges that are not on our system, but we track all the bridges in the state. And so the RTC we've coordinated with to use some of that money here in Reno, and otherwise the projects that you heard about on the I-80 bridges. So going from Keystone to State Line on I-80, we have the intention of 2 packages, if you will. They're going to be sizable, multiple $100 million projects to replace whether it's one bridge or pairs of bridges, depending on how I-80 is set up at that point in the future. One of the challenges is environmental restrictions, and you heard a little bit about environmental restrictions with adding that lane between McCarran and Keystone coming into town, and air conformity. I say it's a challenge because we have to do environmental analysis on any project that we do. The more significant the project, the more intense the analysis. And specifically, if we were going to widen a bridge instead of simply replace it as is, there's more environmental challenges. So specifically, we are aware of the development on the south side of I-80 across from Boomtown at Garson. And so we're going to work with the RTC to figure out what's the best timing. We know that we were planning on spending money to replace that structure as is. That's probably $15 million. I'm just throwing a number out there. And if we had the desire, or the desire was there to widen or even realign that structure because of the angle it's at, then we have the ability to work with RTC, county, all the stakeholders, the casino, Cabela's, everyone in the area, to make sure we do the best project there and spend the money and get not just the bridge, but the infrastructure on both sides of the bridge that we need. So that is an ongoing process for very specifically that structure, but our intent to replace all those structures out to State Line. And the last thing I would like to say, Commissioner Reese mentioned the speed of government. We always appreciate the opportunity to work with our local agencies, the RTCs across the state. We also have MPOs and a whole list of more acronyms. If anybody wants to learn them or add on to them, you can make up your own. It happens. But we have MPOs, RTCs, all the counties, all the cities we're working with on an ongoing basis. We look forward to keeping that relationship going and doing the best we can for all of our users across the state. In the 2021 legislature, they gave NDOT the direction to implement an advisory working group to address NDOT's statewide transportation funding. And there was 29 stakeholders involved, so NDOT led the effort. We tried not to say it was an NDOT effort because it was a statewide stakeholder effort. All the RTCs, again, all different stakeholders, city councils, trucking, just across the whole, representatives from the tax board, a broad brush of the state was involved, and the task was come up with recommendations for addressing sustainable funding. There was a few other recommendations. That was the best one. And so that report actually was due to the legislature this year. So we completed that report in November, December. It's out. It was sent to the legislature. It is full of recommendations for what could be done, whether it's fuel tax related, delivery, electric vehicles, road user charges. It's a really extensive document of possibilities. And the intent of the legislature was, we want you to do this study and give it back to us so we have it, so we can see the options. From here, it'll be the option of whichever members of the legislature and committees to take action if they desire. It's not NDOT or any of the stakeholders going and campaigning for increases. It was an informative study. It was completed. It's really interesting. It included, if you increase this rate, this amount, this is what amount of funding it would generate in a particular year. Obviously estimates, but a very detailed report. So that's there. The other part of the study that was documented was NDOT's funding shortfall of between $500 million and $1 billion per year that is indicated by our performance measures. And Mr. Carroll also referred to pavement condition. We have pavement condition, we have bridge condition, we have our maintenance facilities. We have the need to address traffic movement, if you will, in our congested areas. And that all amounts to the shortfall that we recognize. The effects of that shortfall is while we do studies and we indicate projects, it's an ongoing challenge to use that prioritization process, have a list of all the projects prioritized statewide, and then address them with the funding that we do have. And it is state and federal funding, but that is a shortfall that we have. And so between environmental challenges, right-of-way challenges were mentioned. If we're going to go out and get easements to work on someone's property or potentially have a fee taken of a property, it could be up to 2 years to accomplish that process per legal requirements. And then the funding at the end is those three factors are the main thing for limiting the speed of how we can accomplish projects. So I added that part on at the end just to address some of your comments, but I'm happy to answer any more questions or get answers to any questions that you might have. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any questions for? Okay,
Great report. Thank you.
thank you. All right, Commissioner announcements and updates. Anyone have any announcements or updates? Mr. Reese?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think this is the part of our board agenda, both for announcements and updates and requests for information for future agenda items. So a couple of things. First, I want to thank Mr. Thomas for his presence in DC in early January. I think this is an important part of our strategic focus on making sure that this region receives infrastructure dollars that are desperately needed. So he and I were both able to be there in the first part of January, and I think that speaks volumes to the larger, I suppose, intellectual analysis that's being done by your office. So thank you for that. I also want to certainly give my thanks to Director Swallow. I also had the opportunity to meet with Ms. Larkin Thomason earlier this week and Deputy Director Mortensen. So those were both excellent connections. And Deputy Director Tedford, I appreciated very much your presentation today because of the depth of it. I think it'll help us to understand our region's infrastructure needs going forward. I wanted to identify two items that I think would behoove us, and Mr. Thomas, this is for you, really. One is Mr. Kinson requested support this morning for changes to NRS 277. And while I'm not sure what those might be or the extent of them, I do think it's important that we connect with our labor groups to understand what might be coming. I understand that maybe one of our local assembly members is interested in bringing a bill on these topics, and so that'll behoove you and Mr. Nelson to make sure that we know what those are, and also to work with our labor groups to understand what their needs are. I think that's an important part of my interest in this body, is making sure that we are not only handling the infrastructure things, which is a fair amount of what we've dealt with today is really infrastructure related, but I also want to understand a bit more about the public transit aspect of it. And in that vein, so that's one thing, this request was made by one of the public commentators this morning, but also the second thing is, I understand that there are ways to measure sort of performance metrics on the public transit side. And I think that earlier this summer, before I came on the body, there was some information provided to the board members about that. And for me, I would like to see that going forward. I would like to understand how are we evaluating our public transit system. And I think what we do not measure, we cannot properly evaluate. So I'd like to see what kind of metrics we're using. So those are the two ideas I have. Perhaps those can be more greatly, especially the public transit performance metrics, perhaps those are really related to what we can do during our March retreat, because I think that the things that were identified there by our labor folks in the Teamsters really are important. It's like things about ridership and what is the experience that they're having, what is the experience of the drivers, how do we focus on the metrics that allow us to evaluate the public transportation side. And again, I'll just say that for my part, we've now been here for a couple hours this morning, or nearing 2 hours, and 99% of that's been focused on the construction side of it. And so, of course, I think that as we move forward as a board, and today we have 2 alternates and one of our board members missing. So it's good, A, that we have alternates who are able to so quickly jump in and know this world well, but are also learning as much as I am. So I definitely will be interested in these kind of things as we move forward, and all in the spirit of learning how to best serve on this board. So thank you.
And just so you know, that was already going to be one of our topics at the retreat. So a half a step ahead of you.
Well, you're often many steps ahead of me, Mr. Mayor, and that's one of the reasons why we get along so well. You help to educate me.
Okay, anyone else? Okay. With that then, we move on to public comment. Anyone in the public wishing to make a comment at this time? See none, we'll bring it back and we'll go to my favorite item, adjournment.